government officials, and proposed measures include diplomatic efforts, visa restrictions, travel bans, and sanctions against ICC personnel and affiliated organizations. The Philippines, of course, was a state party to the Rome Statute until former President Rodrigo Duterte withdrew the country from it in 2019. Duterte, as everyone knows, is detained at The Hague and is set for trial in November over crimes against humanity charges linked to his drug war. And this is what we were showing you earlier. Oil companies are once again implementing increases in the price of fuel products across the board. Diesel is now more expensive by 4 pesos and 60 cents per liter, while gasoline prices have increased by a peso per liter. Kerosene is up by 2 pesos and 30 centavos per liter. Per liter. The Department of Energy attributed the latest hike to renewed geopolitical tensions in the Middle East and Iran, which have disrupted global oil supplies after the Strait of Hormuz was once again closed to vessel traffic.
And joining us perhaps in a little bit will be Storycon's resident political heckler, Mr. Raul Llamas, who is not yet here,
But from the Philippine Star, of course, we've got Editor-in-Chief Amy Pamintuan. Hi, Amy.
Amy!
Hi, Wedge. Hi, Ed. Hi, everybody.
Yeah.
Kumusta panonood niya?
Hello to our listeners on the radio as well, before we forget, on 105.9 True FM.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in. Pabalik tayo sa impeachment trial, but just to quickly sum up what's going on. Before we started the show, the defense counsel was speaking, and he laid the basis basically of their defense for this article. He said it is their position that the statements made by the Vice President were not threats. They were not threats to begin with, and therefore they are trying to argue that the discussion on the elements of a threat is not applicable in this case. He also says, number two, it was never aimed directly at BBM, First Lady, FL, and for the former speaker. This part, I'm not sure what he meant by that, because those three people were specifically called out by the Vice President when she made that video, when she made those statements in 2024. So hindi ko alam ano exactly ibig sabihin ng Defense Counsel.
Sagot lang daw yun. Sagot lang daw sa question sa press con.
Ang sabi niya, these were not threats. This is Attorney Binluan, the Defense Counsel. These were not threats daw, just a response to a Q&A in the press conference.
Yun ang point nila. Na di naman daw sinabi kay BBM, oy, papatayin kita. Kundi, yun na nga, may context na tinanong kasi netong si Maui at sumagot lang sila. Yun ang context ng defense. At dinagdagan nga nung statement ni BP Sara kanina, sabi niya, inimbento lang yung threat, inimbento yung assassin, and this is all a waste of time.
To your second point, that the defense was saying that it was never aimed directly at the President and the First Lady and the Speaker. Ang sabi ni Attorney Binluan, if they had not watched the video, they would never have known about it. So that's
medyo mali yun.
Here they are trying to argue that the second condition of a threat was not met, meaning the people threatened never found out about it.
If
they hadn't seen it. But it was very, very public.
Okay, now I feel like we're just. Now I feel like we're just.
widely reported.
Now I feel like we're just splitting hairs here.
There you go. But that's what they're supposed to be doing as lawyers.
So which comes back to my question of, I want to hear the explanation behind his second argument, behind Attorney Binluan's second argument, that it was never directly aimed at BBM, FL, and former Speaker. Because again, those three were specifically mentioned when the Vice President held that press conference back in 2024. So what does that mean? I can only surmise na ibig niya sabihin was he just mentioned them out of, that was just a sheer coincidence.
I'd imagine what he's trying to say.
Parang kumbaga sa Borel, hindi siya nag-aim. Yun lang ang pagkaintindi ko doon.
Well, hindi siya nag-end directly,
nag-end.
parang shotgun, kumbaga. But I
Parang
don't
sinabi
think
lang
that's the right
niya, ay,
parallel.
ito, ganito, ganito. Hindi niya sinabing, oy, papatayin ko kayo.
I can
Yun ang
imagine.
argument, ha? I mean,
Yeah.
yun lang ang pwede kong intindi ron.
I would imagine that the argument that they're trying to propound is basically this: na the Vice President did not say this in a message direct to the face or addressed directly to the President.
Yun na nga, na hindi niya sinabi, oy,
face
Mr.
to face,
President,
o kaya
papatayin
pinaparating ko
ko
sa
kayo
iyo.
pag may papatay sa inyo pag may nangyari sa akin. Hindi ganun yung pagkakasabi.
This is not my point of view, but I can imagine this is what they're trying to say. There was a question, and she responded with that statement, not addressed directly to the President, but addressed to the general public. Or addressed to the reporter.
No, address to the, kung yun nagtatanong kasi sabi niya, huwag kang mag-alala.
But that's not a
meron na
condition
akong
of
ganito eh."
threat. That's not a condition of threat
Diba?
that you address the person being threatened directly. It could be through a middleman, for example. That's
Yeah.
not a condition of a threat.
Yeah.
And so now I am so utterly frustrated by the fact na ang tagal-tagal, we've been arguing about what the conditions of a threat are. And at this point, we still have not come to a conclusion.
Hindi, yun yung side
but
ng
there's-
defense kasi. I'm sure
Yeah.
they know, mga abogado yan eh. Kaya lang
But
they have
keep
to
in mind,
argue. Kung ano yung side nila, they have to defend their side.
And also keep in mind,
Yeah, ganon.
you don't have to think along the lines directly of Article 282 of the Revised Penal Code, because that's not what we're applying here anyway.
Magbibigay sila ng defense, sarili nilang side dyan.
It doesn't have to apply.
Kaya
Article 282 doesn't have to
naman
apply
yan,
here.
diba? Makakapagsagot pa rin naman yung prosecution.
Okay, I get it.
Now, to the
Pero-
question of Senator Pia Cayetano, the question being, would it be a grave threat if the person who was supposedly threatened did not feel threatened? I mean, who should feel threatened ba for it to become grave threat? The person being threatened or the general public?
I would imagine for a high-ranking public official, it doesn't have to be the person being threatened. The question is, as well, don't forget, it's not a criminal court of law. We're just dealing with an impeachment
impeachment
here. Are you fit to hold office? That's all the question that we're answering here. And one of the saner commentary about this that I've read is from Manolo Quezon, who agreed that we're over-judicializing this process. Hindi naman life, liberty, and property yung at stake dito eh. Which is what's at stake in a criminal court of law. We're only answering a very simple question, which is this person fit to hold office? And I don't understand why we have to spend 2-3 days arguing. Well, I guess, as Ambi
4
said, that's
days
the
na.
defense. That's the
Ang
defense's
fifth day
right.
na.
To argue about. But now we're getting into
Into the weeds.
we're very deep into the weeds now.
We're digging a hole already.
Yung debate kahapon about the typos in the subpoena and the affidavit. That took 3 hours of debating, I think.
Oh, anyway,
Bigyan kasi ng
ating-
10 days eh. Siguro feeling nila kailangan ubusin yung 10 days.
11 days.
11
one
days.
after.
Anyways,
Hindi
Ang
ba?
ating
Here,
resident political pundit
someone
is here.
who knows about grave threats, Ronald Llamas,
Ikaw.
he has lived through a
Ayan
lot of
yung
grave
nagte-threaten paano.
Hindi. Dati, once upon a time, he also received was on the receiving end of a lot of grave threats. So ikaw nga, ano ang grave threats sa'yo?
Well, kung public official ka kasi, marami ka nakukuhang mga threats. Marami naman doon, hindi naman, mga kuwan lang yan mga text messages. No? Ako nga, pinadalan pa ako ng kahon sa bahay.
Ano laman?
Alam mo na kon?
Wag natin pag-usapan.
Hindi nga, alam mo na kon.
Medyo grotesque. Anyway, so, nangyayari yan. Pero, ibang usapin kasi kung yung Vice President publicly threatening the President na siya yung successor. No? Iba yon. Iba yung mga nare-receive mo as a public official. Nakaramihan naman unfounded. Dahil, naman katulad nung nag-threaten kay Digong na school teacher na nag-post sa FB niya.
Nakulong.
Na nakulong
Ronel,
agad, diba?
Ronel
Yes.
Mas. Ronel Mas ng Bataan.
nag-apologize. He was
Nakaluhod
forced,
pa siya
Umiyak
pagka
pa,
ano.
umiyak
he
pa.
was forced to apologize.
Posas.
At walang capability to implement his threat. So, ihiwalay mo yung mga ganon, di ba?
So you're saying double standards tayo?
Yes.
Because
pero-
that was considered a threat.
Oo, iba eh. Iba yung...
Or he posted that he would pay 50 million.
Kaya nga sinasabi ko, iba yung intent, iba yung official na nagtathreaten, iba yung ginawa publicly, at iba yung meron kang hindi lang intent, kundi capability. At ikaw yung magiging successor kung ma-implement yung threat. Dahil pinapahiwatig kahapon ni Alan Peter na yung ibig sabihin ng conditional na threat ay hindi naman na-implement yung threat. So,
Hindi naman
Hindi,
kailangan.
iba yun.
Kung na-implement yun,
ah,
hindi na threat yun.
murder na yun.
Anyway, si Atty. Ligutan raised jurisprudence it's the Santiago Paera versus People of the Philippines, May 30, 2011, to the question of Pia Cayetano. Ang ruling doon, according to Atty. Ligutan, was it's not necessary that the recipient felt fear or felt that the threat was serious. It's only necessary for it to be proven that the accused intended to have that effect. Whether the fear was felt or not is inconsequential daw.
At hindi kailangan ng private complainant.
No, yeah.
Pati si,
Well,
si
obvious-
Escudero sinabi yun.
Oh,
Ilan lang
obvious
daw
naman-
yung mga private crimes.
Especially,
Tapos na
Grave
pag
threat.
pres-
Kaya yung mga bomb threat sa NAIA, kahit
there you
walang
Oo. It's a
personal
criminal
complaint,
offense.
pwede
Oo.
kang makulong.
Kalaboso ka kagad.
It's especially if you're talking about the president, vice president, Senate
Yeah.
president, House Speaker. Those are all, and they have a mandate to immediately investigate, di ba? That's why I found
NBI.
yung debate
Yeah.
over motu proprio.
Yeah.
Kailangan ba mag motu proprio
Ang NBI
investigation or
nasa ano nila,
automatic?
nasa mandate talaga nila yon. The
At
top
saka
5 officials, pag may threat, kaya magreklamo kay hindi, they investigate.
Yes.
But in the
halimbawa,
case nga of the Vice President, hindi daw sila nakakuha ng cooperation when they tried. Yan sa
halimbawa,
threat na yan.
tiniretan ako ng Ed Lingao.
Ikaw
Tapos
na naman.
dahil ako ay naging
Hindi
anxious,
NBI papasok dyan. Pulis lang
tinretin
yan.
ko si Reg. Anong kinalaman ng threat sa akin ni Ed dun sa threat ko sa'yo? No?
Well,
Hindi ko pinag-usapan ng kaso sa akin.
Oo. Ibig sabihin, yung threat ko sa'yo, yun yung magiging basis ng kaso ko. Di ba? Hindi ko pwedeng i-explain yung threat ko sa'yo by being threatened by Ed Lingao.
pero kasi the defense is trying to paint a picture na reaction lang yun.
Kaya nga
Hindi siya
sinasabi
threat.
ko, well, whether reaction o hindi, it was a wrong reaction. No?
Also,
dahil
Unconventional ang word nila.
Also remember,
hindi mo nga alam kung sino nag-threaten sa'yo. Si BBM ba yung nag-threaten sa'yo?
also
Si
remember,
BBM ang tinreaten mo eh.
Mm.
Ng, ayaw nila tawagin assassination. Tinreaten mo si BBM ng death. Di ba?
Pag namatay siya.
Ed.
Oo.
But you don't even know kung sino pumatay sa kanya kung sakali. How do you even prove that the president was the one who had her killed?
It doesn't... ano?
Kaya siya nagbanta. So, kaya ang sabi niya, pag may pumatay sa akin, tirahin mo to.
Oo,
But
conditional
how do
daw
you
yun.
even know na siya yung responsable sa pagpatay sa akin?
Oh, it doesn't matter. The threat remains.
Yeah.
Yung
But
sinasabi,
what I'm saying is that it's not a justification. I mean, it shouldn't be justification.
Oo nga, yun nga yung sinasabi ko.
But that's,
I'm just elucidating on your point.
Oo, yun nga sinabi ko.
pero mukhang so at this point we now have the backbone of the defense arguments ng defense.
It is a Q&A.
Number one, which is that
It wasn't a
it was
threat.
no. The first one was
It was not a threat.
not a
It was a
threat.
response to a question and answer.
Yeah, it's not a threat.
okay.
Yan
So
ang
the
number
first one is it's their position that the statements made by the vice president were not threats to begin with.
Yeah.
But number two, which
It was
they
not propounded directly. It was never aimed
Not
directly.
directed
the
at
one
the
that they brought
president.
up last week.
Pero mismo yung defense, ang sinasabi nila, the trigger dun sa...
Sorry. That was the second thing, which is there's context to this.
Oo nga,
You
ayan.
cannot take a 2-minute part of a 2-hour video and judge her based on that. Yun yung second argument nila, which is there's context to this. She was pushed to the edge. There was systematic oppression. She felt threatened for her life. She felt threatened as a wife, mother, sister, and so on and so forth, not as the vice president. Therefore, she said those
Pero
things.
in the same breath, sinasabi ng defense na trigger siya dahil dun sa nangyari kay Zulaika. So ano ba talaga, kuya? Yung na-trigger ka dahil dun sa Romanov threat sa'yo, na nagsimula dun sa brother mo threatening the president, or dun sa sinabi mismo ng defense, kaya nga pinatawag si Zulaika today dahil yung trigger daw dun sa outburst, unhinged threat ng vice president ay si Zulaika. Iba yun, ha? Iba yung si Zulaika. Iba yung Romanov threat sa iyo at sa iyong pamilya. No? So sinasabi nila nanggaling yan sa defense, ha? No? Kaya pinatawag si Zulaika na hindi naman originally kasama sa
Witness
witnesses.
list.
Kaya iniintay natin ngayon si Zulaika. Kaya lang, hindi pa matapos-tapos tong interrogation.
I don't even know if
NBI
aabot sila kay
official.
I don't even know if aabot sila kay Zulaika because when they adjourned yesterday, sabi ng defense they were only halfway through with him. So that means another 3-4 hours today?
Tsaka kung pagod na sila, baka they'd rather have Zulaika tomorrow.
Tsaka hindi pa naman nangangalahati yung target nila na 11 days. Ikalimang araw pa lang ngayon.
I don't know.
Kaya nga ini-stretch siya, sabi ko, sinabihan
How
ko siya na
much
10-11 days,
more
yan tuloy.
hair splitting do I have to listen to?
Mukhang gusto nila i-maximize yung 11 days. Ano ka ba?
Kailangan i-maximize yun.
Yung
Yung kay Zulaika, ano yun, ha? Kaya sila nagalit kasi ipapakulong sana.
hindi ko
Padadala
alam.
sana sa correctional institution
sa
for
Mandaluyong.
women.
After 5 days of very long trials, I don't know that it's any clearer to the public what they're debating here.
Nag-tune out na yung public nung day one pa lang eh.
If anything, it's become buried under legalese. Kasi nga, masyado tayong...
Well, yung isang interview ko dito sa TV5 last week, sinabi ko, baka bahagi yan ng strategy
could be, yes.
na
Kanina strategy?
boring us to death sa defense. No?
Yeah.
Dahil ang pangkasi rito ay kung lalabas yung mga ebidensya, uulit-ulitin mo yung threat ni Sarah sa Court of Public Opinion, lalabang yung prosecution. Lalo na dito sa article na ito, na halos open and shut case na ito. Ang pinagdidebatihan na lang yung context. Di ba? Yun na lang yung pinagdidebatihan.
The
May
justification.
context. No? The authenticity of the threat remain. Ang sinasabi na lang, ito ay may context kaya hindi siya impeachable. No? Medyo kanyon. Slippery slope na yan.
Yeah, because then that should apply to
That's a
any
stretch,
ordinary
huh?
citizen. Diba? You can argue na...
Masakit yung paa ko kaya biglaan ko siya.
What?
There you go.
What?
Kahit ano pa yung context kasi, tinreten mo yung presidente, ikaw yung beneficiary dahil ikaw yung vice president, at ginawa mong very public.
Pero yun nga, the problem is hindi tayo nagkakaintindihan because the crux of their argument is it wasn't a threat to begin with.
Parang yung argumento natin sa fourth tweet, ano? How immediate is immediate.
Nagbabalik.
I know what I know what
buhay natin.
alam mo kahit doon until now there's no closure, no, because I know the Supreme Court ruled against the House of Representatives there, pero nakusap din natin yung ibang framers of the Constitution who believe that the spirit of the law is forthwith immediately. Without
Now
delay.
na. Yeah,
Now na. Oo.
Sabi ni Adolf Ascuna, siya daw ang nagsulat ng linyang yun sa Constitution. Ibig sabihin nun, now na.
Yeah.
Wala pa rin nangyari, no?
Pati si Christian Monzod, sabi, the intent is for it to happen immediately. Drop everything and do this now.
Tsaka si Webster din.
Sino Webster? Webster
Dictionary.
Dictionary. Si Miriam and si Webster. But
Lahat ng dictionary, chicken niya. Walang pagkakaiba yung
But there you go.
definition.
Now you have the Supreme Court making that jurisprudence na forthwith means, I forgot their exact definition.
Basically, it's prerogative ng
Ng Senate.
ng Senate.
Oo, nasa prerogative.
I suppose they were just being careful not to step on the Senate's prerogatives on when to schedule.
Fourth tweet is
Kumbaga, parang
discretionary.
konsensya mo na yun.
That's a slippery slope, sabi ni Ami.
I know. There are times when the Supreme Court just decides to be very conservative.
Basta ang threat ay hindi
That's
threat
one way to see
until na-implement yung threat.
Then it's not called a
We
threat.
cannot go
di
that
ba?
far.
Common
We
sense
cannot
yun,
go
di ba?
that far.
Sabihin nyo kay Alan.
Di ba? May level-level yan eh. May pagbabanta, may pagplano, ibig
Hindi,
sabihin
actually,
conspiracy na yun.
in
at
the law,
pag-execute.
merong definition yung grave threat eh. Merong light threat, may grave threat. When is it not a grave threat? Nandun naman eh.
Oo, nandun nga. Yung three
Kaya lang,
conditions.
ito pa rin tayo
Three
naging-
definitions.
At saka walang
Nag-ano pa rin tayo. Nag-argumento pa rin tayo.
walang nakalagay sa ganong klaseng precedent yung context.
Na if you were threatened yourself, pwede.
Oo.
Kaya meron din naman doon conditional threat, dinidefine din doon sa batas.
Yes. But
Nakalagay
conditional for...
conditional threat, unconditional threat, light threat. Malinaw naman yung pagkakasabi doon. Meron namang Tagalog translation ng Revised Penal Code kung gusto natin. Kaya lang binigyan nga kasi ng 10 to 11 days to para tapusin. Kaya we have to sit through 10 or 11 days of this discussion.
Tara na.
The law also does not require that the threat should have moved forward into the contracting of somebody to carry out the threat for it to become a grave threat. In other words,
Actually, iniintay natin yung ganyang testimony, no, na
kasi yun ang
na-trace ba
pinangako
kayong
kahapon.
assassin?
Yun ang pinangako kahapon ng ng prosecution
Oo nga.
na parang
Yan ang
hindi ko
inintay
ata
natin.
nakita
Si Sulaika,
eh.
saka si Assassin, kung may na-trace man.
It doesn't
Kaya lang
feel...
here we are still stuck in the definition
I
of
don't
grave
think
threat.
there's gonna be an so-called assassin presented. Wala pa tayong naririnig. Albeit they are allowed unnamed witnesses, of course. So we don't know. Halfway na tayo.
Yeah. Well, yun kasi during the offer yesterday of the prosecution of the witness, that was one of that was the second thing that they offered, that the witness will prove that the Vice President contracted a mamamatay tao, as the prosecution put it.
Oo nga, huwag niyong gagamitin salitang assassin.
Pero yun nga there were some people who were also asking na in the end ba, should we get stuck with the question on whether or not may nakontrata ba o hindi? Is that
Oo
the
nga, it
question
doesn't matter,
that needs to
actually.
be asked? Or is it the
Ulitin mo,
question?
Ed. Because a lot of people are still hung up on that. Ulitin mo. It doesn't
Basically,
matter
ang tanong ba kung meron bang nakontrata o wala? Yun ba yung tanong? O meron bang pagbabanta o wala? Kasi it's grave threat.
Kung may
Because you don't have
nakuhang
to go-
assassin, it doesn't matter. Yun ang sabi ng... Yun ang iniintay natin patunayan ng prosecution. Tignan natin.
Oo. It doesn't have to go so far as mangontrata ka ng
Nahuli ba si assassin?
Kasi hindi na yung grave threat.
Oo.
It's
It doesn't
conspiracy
have to go
to
Kasi
that
grave
far.
threat yan eh.
Ibang kaso na yun.
Oo nga, kung may
Ibang kaso
nahuli
rin.
man, dahil wala namang napatay, hindi nga naman siya assassin. Kayo talaga.
Iba na yan. Conspiracy na yan.
Conspiracy to create murder.
Conspiracy na
Pwedeng
yan.
sabihin nung mamamatay tao, hindi naman yung para pumatay ng tao, tinutulungan lang ako sa ganito, sa ganon. Kung may na-matrace man na pera, mapapatunayan mo ba na para sa pagpatay yun? Wala naman nagpipirmahan dyan.
Daming qualifications.
Oo nga eh.
Well, as
Hindi kasi
Senator,
nahahawa na tayo dyan sa diskusyon.
as Senator Alan Peter Cayetano said before, and he was one of the times that he manifested, he said there's a very fine line between
A
Between
warning.
a warning and
a
a threat.
warning.
And a
That's
threat.
right. So now we have a new word. There's a very fine line between a warning and a threat.
A threat.
So I guess I don't know. He was trying to say na warning lang yon.
Kasi sinasabi niya, si Baste Duterte in his
Yung kay
January
Baste yun,
2024 Maisog Rally statement, sabi niya, baka raw warning lamang yung kay Baste kasi sabi ni Baste, before you go to sleep tonight, remember the Romanovs.
And
remember
Mussolini.
Hindi niya binanggit Mussolini eh. Remember the Romanovs and remember your family in 1986. So sabi niya, baka lang parang remember your family in 86 and Romanov, ibig sabihin napatalsik yung dalawa.
Binanggit niya si
But he forgot Mussolini, who was binitin pati Warek with the wife by Italian
Ang sinasabi
Partisans.
lang naman natin, nagsimula yung Romanov doon.
Kay Baste, oo.
Okay, Baste. Yun lang
Saka wala naman
sinasabi
nagsasabi
natin.
na death threat yung kay Baste na yun. Eh.
Oo.
Yun naman was taken really as a warning. Wala
So-
naman nagsabi no na,
A warning
kung hindi,
for a-
kinasuhan na yan eh.
A warning for
Wala
a
naman nagsabi
massacre.
sa kanya na nag-threaten siya na iro-Romanov namin kayo.
A warning
naman
for a
nagsabi.
massacre.
So again, borrowing their logic, pag sinabi ko sa'yo, Ronald, remember the time na inambush ka at gumulong ka sa palabas ng
putik.
kotse. Oh. That's a warning, not a threat.
It's
Remember
a
that
reminder. Oh.
Pag kay Ronald, reminder. Because he's lived through it before, gano'n.
Hindi, because hindi mo naman siya kaaway.
Oh, yun ang context.
Hindi mo siya kaaway. So it's just a reminder.
I wouldn't go that
Pero kung
far.
alam na
I
magkaaway
wouldn't go
kayo,
that
it
far.
can be taken as a warning.
There's,
Or depende sa pagkakasabi, it can be a threat. Depende sa pagkakasabi.
Hindi siya yung beneficiary.
Saka hindi ka beneficiary.
beneficiary
Hindi,
ako.
alam naman natin kung ano yung threat, no?
There was also a
Kaya
question
mahirap
by
talaga
one of the center
pag
judges.
pinasukan
kung-
ng mga abogado.
Pero yun nga, tama yung sabi ni Ami. Pag pinasukan ng mga abogado, magkikwibol na yan.
Oh, yeah.
Sa
But that-
kaliitang
that's what they're supposed to be,
detalye.
that's what they're paid to do.
Oo. And that's what
So,
weakens our judicial system. Yung ganong klase yung mga attitude.
There was also back and forth a while ago dun sa tanong. I think one of the center judges was asking the witness, did you conduct the same kind of investigation on the threats to the vice president as you did to the threats to the president? And if not, why not? Hindi ba pareho silang dapat inimbestigahan? Which was a fair question. Ang sagot ng witness was, iba yung threat dun sa presidente, dun sa threat sa vice president. Because the threat to the vice president was only claimed by the side of the vice president. The threat to the president was aired publicly by the vice president. In other words, very apparent yung threat to the president by the vice president herself. Whereas yung project Romanov or Oplan Romanov is so far ethereal. We're only hearing bits and pieces.
Pero kailangan
of
kasi
their side.
sabihin nung side ng defense, ano yung context nung threat ng Romanov, Project Romanov, saan nila nakuha yon? No? Para may basihan na merong threat. No? Ibang usapin pa kung warrant nito yung ginawa naman niyang threat sa presidente. No? Dahil kung may threat man sa kanya, kailangan niyang sabihin, saan ba nang galing? No? Nakuha mo ba through text? Tinawagan ka ba? May nakuha ka bang kahon? Katulad nung nangyari sa akin dati,
May kahon
may kahon.
na hihiwagaan tuloy ako sa kahon mo.
Hindi, basta kahon, tapos may patay na animal sa loob. Tapos may bala.
hindi naman pet mo.
Tapos may,
Horror movie na yon.
Parang mafia, parang movie. Parang
Galing
movie.
kay?
Parang The Godfather.
Galing
Ganang
kay?
klase.
Parang ulo ng kabayo, gano'n.
Kabayo yun, kabayo. Mahal
Ikaaway
ang
mo
kabayo.
dati
hindi
na
ka
friend mo
Mahal
na
ng
ngayon.
kabayo eh. Oo. So,
Oh, mahal ng kabayo.
Mahal
Sa
yung,
labas ng
mahal yung
aking
racehorse.
mapapatunayan ko ba na sa Edlingao ang
Alam mo,
nag-threaten?
Mas mabuti pa siguro kung hindi
You
sila
got-
nagbanggit ng Oplan Romanov eh.
So you got
Kasi
the
pwede
message.
naman sabihin ni BP Sara, I felt threatened dahil pinull out yung aking bodyguard.
Oh.
Mga ganong mga circumstantial na lang. Kesa ganyan
But
may
ikaw,
binanggit kang ganyan na wala naman nakapag-imbestiga
Dun
yung
sa
Oplan
kahon,
Romanov.
you got the message, diba?
Oh,
Hindi ka na
nung panahon na yon, criticize ko si President Erap. Pero hindi ko naman, dahil nakakuha ko ng ganong klaseng threat, no? Hindi naman ibig sabihin ite-threaten ko si President Erap as a response, no? At ang aking paliwanag, nag-threaten kasi ako dahil may nakuha akong kahon. So,
Are you sure it was a threat? Baka it was a Q&A.
Baka it was
Kwartso ko kahon.
Baka it was a joke.
So, kanya nga, saan nga nang galing yung threat? Threat ba talaga yon? Diba? At yung threat ba na yun, nanggaling doon sa ite-threaten ko rin. No? Ang daming if eh.
You never found out.
Ang daming
Hindi mo
if
na-
eh.
hindi mo na-
Siyempre, may deduction ka dahil sino ba mga binabanatan mo noon. Isa ron, nag-threaten sa'yo. So,
But
pero...
you cannot assume and use
I
that
cannot
assumption
assume na itong isa na ito, yung nagpadala noon, kaya pwede ko siya i-threaten back.
publicly.
Oo.
Doon, sasabit ka doon.
Yun yung problema dyan sa mga ganyang klaseng threat. Una, totoo bang may threat? No? Ngayon kasi wala tayong alam eh. No? May nagpadala ba ng ng patay na animal sa bahay mo? Na may isang basyo ng bala? No? Nangyari ba yan? O may nag-text sa'yo? May naglagay ba sa Facebook? Katulad sa tatay mo? Ano ba talaga yung nangyaring threat? Una, sabihin mo. No? Ikalawa, ay justified ba na yung threat na yon ay mag-threaten ako ng iba? No? Justified ba yun?
Is there justification for great
Wala.
threats?
Wala.
I don't think the law says
Wala dapat.
anything about it.
Sinasabi ko, yun ang ginagamit nila ng logic eh.
Pero yung first part, sinagot na nila kahapon. In fact, paikot-ikot tayo doon sa yung inimbestigahan ba yung threats to the life of the Vice President. And sinagot na ng NBI, which is, they did invite the Vice President, but she didn't appear. Nagpadala siya ng lawyer, and they did validate daw the claim and didn't find anything. So gusto sana nila malaman directly from the Vice President herself, saan nanggaling yung threat, in what form did it take, kaya lang she never appeared before them.
Mahirap kasi kung wala
Kaya
ka namang...
dapat yung initial na anong yon, nag-file na sila ng merong ganitong Oplan Romanov. Mas malakas sana yung case nila ngayon kung sakasakali.
Yung ginagawang simple ng mga tao, magpa-blatter ka sa barangay.
Yun, magpapablatter ka.
Sa presinto, pa-blatter
Importante
mo.
yun, ha? Importante yun. If you're going to claim
Or
na
have a
you
report
were
filed by
you're an
the
aggrieved
BPSG.
party. Kailangan mo
Vice
ng formal
Presidential Protective
Ngayon may counting...
formal report man lang.
Ngayon may counting capability. Konti, hindi pa naman kumpleto. Halimbawa, pag may nag-threaten sa'yo through text, merong technology para matrace yun, no? Kung may nag-threaten sa'yo sa email, no? Merong technology para matrace
Kung digital,
yun.
kung digital.
Oo, kung digital. Dati kasi...
Pero yung kapareho
hirap eh.
sa'yo, yung analog mo na nasa kahon, ay hirap.
Oo.
Analogy nasa kahon.
Correct. Unless may CCTV. Noong panahon kasi na yun, wala pa CCTV. Oo. That was late na.
But
late
you don't even
90s.
have to authenticate this one anymore.
Kaya nga.
This is basically, okay, how do you interpret it? If
Pero
you have to interpret it at all. And
ang sinasabi ko nga,
is
it
it
doesn't
justifiable?
matter eh. No, kung may threat
Yeah,
sa akin
it
o
doesn't
wala.
matter.
No, ang mahalaga, may ginawa akong grave threats to the highest official of the land at ako yung beneficiary as the second highest official of the land. At ginawa ko lahat ito in public at ako ay may capability para implement yun. No?
So basically, questions lang that I suppose should be answered. Number one is, were there grave threats? Number two, was that behavior something to be expected?
Warranted from someone
warranted?
who was threatened.
And number three, is it an impeachable offense?
Yung number 3, pinaka-importante dyan, dapat yun yung ano ngayon.
The others appear to be a bit of
Yan ang titingnan natin kung
inconsequential
yan ang
questions like-
lalabas. After all this convoluted questioning, kung anong magiging appreciation ng senator judges, impeachable ba o hindi? It will all boil down to that question.
Eh, impatient kasi kayo eh. Wala pang ang kalahati ng 11
Oo
days.
nga eh, nakakaano pa lang tayo,
Napaka-impatient
5
nyo
days.
naman.
Kalahati pa lang
Lalo na
yan.
yung katabi ko sa kanan. Very impatient. Wala pang kalahati. Hintayin nyo muna. No?
Sayang naman yung build-up ng telenovela.
Don't we have enough problems to fix?
Tingnan mo,
We have to waste so many days on this?
This is the opium of the masses.
Oh my goodness.
Ayun,
Don't we
tingnan mo.
have enough problems in the economy?
Look
Bigger
at the
opium
senator. Kinakailangan mag-perform because it's an era of performative politics.
And it's 2 years before
Everything
election.
is about
Do we
performance.
really need 92 days of this? Do we need 92 days of
Ibang
this?
usapin yung
Is
need.
my question.
Ibang usapin yung need. Of course, we
In
don't
the meantime, people are still hungry. In the meantime, bagsak pa rin ang
Ibang usapin
ekonomiya.
kung kaninong need.
Oo.
Iba yung need mo sa need.
Kaya dapat talaga inuna yung yung confidential funds saka
Usapan
yung
natin ang economy.
ill-gotten wealth.
Usapan natin ang economy.
Para hindi nabobor dito.
Naunahan na tayo. Naunahan na tayo ng ating Southeast Asian neighbors in terms of growth, no? Naunahan na tayo in terms of inflation, no? Naunahan na tayo in terms of unemployment, no? Oo, yung mga
employment.
key economic indicators. Naiwanan na tayo while tayo ay naging upper middle income country, no?
It's a misnomer itong upper middle income country because it didn't trickle down. Mataas pa rin ang poverty rates. Joblessness is still high. Walang manufacturing base pa rin.
On the other hand, we're all becoming well versed in being armchair lawyers.
Almost lawyers. Ba, kita mo? Almost lawyers. I object, Your Honor.
Ang unemployment is one of our highest, 5.6, no? Around that. No? Nung 3 years ago, bumaba
Dami
yan
pa yan.
Bumaba yan sa
Taas pa yan.
less than 3%.
And mukhang itong war in Iran is kicking up again.
Yes.
So you're gonna see.
Hindi naman siya natigil eh.
Well, nag-ceasefire for a time. It was quiet, and then now you've got the U.S.
May intermission
bombing
lang, Major
Iran once again. So hindi natin alam
Oo,
how
sabi ni
high.
Trump, a deal is still possible. Yan ang pinaka-latest word from him.
At saka
Sabi ni Donald Trump,
nag-nationwide
a deal
nuclear
is still
alert
possible.
ang Iran. Makita niyo ba yon? Nag-nationwide nuclear tawag dyan? Nuclear preparedness ang Iran.
Parang DEFCON 3 ba yan?
Yes, yes.
In the meantime,
Ako,
we've
glass
got,
half full ako. Deal is still possible.
I don't think
You're talking about
I don't
Iran
think
or the impeachment?
That's not. Last he said was, as far as he's concerned, the deal is off the table. Ngayon,
Today, it's a deal still possible.
oh my God.
Kasi tinira ng US ang Iran.
Kaya
Kapag
nga.
sila yung nananalo, deal is possible. This is the
Yan ang
latest
version
today.
ng half full,
Baka maya-maya, alas 12 ng gabi, magbago.
Yan ang version mo ng half full ba?
We gotta
Ngayon,
wait, no?
half full
Magbabago na
tayo
naman.
ngayon.
Napaka-cynical naman ng half full mo.
In the meantime, we've got the Senate flicks to distract us from all our economic problems.
Alam mo yung yung South Korea, ha? They impeach yung gusto lang mag-martial law. They impeach the president.
Kulong
In less
na.
than a year, tanggal siya at kulong.
Oh, kulong na, exactly.
Kulong.
In
That was
fact,
surprisingly fast.
Convicted, kulong,
Ganun lang yun.
replaced.
surprisingly
Makapag-election
fast
na sila.
sa atin. Because again, impeachment is a political process. You're not a
Hindi,
court
ganun
of
din naman
law.
sa kanila. It's a political process sa
Kaya
kanila.
nga, no, I know, but
And the Koreans are pretty fast in putting presidents in jail.
si Ed is saying that ganun lang yun, kabilis.
And
It
dictators.
should be that fast. It
Dictators.
should be that fast. Hindi naman to criminal court of law. Otherwise, the Constitution would have
Yeah.
said, all of you senators should be lawyers. Right? Then,
Objection, Your Honor. You're
objection.
out of order.
Objection.
Baka makasite ako in contempt ng Supreme
You
Court.
know,
ano?
36, 38 years after Ed's, people are still arguing over whether there was ever ill-gotten wealth.
Oo nga. Oy, na-dismiss na halos lahat yan.
Ala.
I think the last case has been dismissed. For
Yeah, because of
inordinate
lack of
delay.
interest
Tingnan
already by the
nyo.
government.
Kaya itong
Yung-
kasong to, madi-dismiss din to for inordinate delay.
You know, the funny thing is yung South Korea also is calling a hearing on their World Cup performance. Kasi of course, natanggal sila sa round of, I think it was round of 32 or group stage. Sabi ko parang, sana yun lang yung problema natin. the football team's performance.
well,
Nagpapatawag
matatawa.
sila ng hearing eh.
Matatawa ka, si Trump nagne-negotiate pa rin nung natalo sila.
Oo nga.
I know,
Kanyang
yung red
forever war.
card.
Yan
Yung
ang
red
kanyang
card.
forever war. Ayaw daw niya ng forever war. Now he has it.
Tapos, ganun pa rin. Sinasabi pa rin niya, Greenland should be ours.
Tahimik ngayon, but I'm sure it'll pick up again. You'll pick up that point again sometime.
Sabi nung
And then he'll say Canada is also theirs.
Danish Prime Minister, it will never be yours.
But Canada is already making moves on the international stage to ally with other middle countries,
Yeah.
middle powers.
Nagda-diversify sila ng kanilang trade na dati ay dependent
Heavily
sa US.
reliant on
Oo.
US. So,
anong
Wala pa rin si
sinasabi nila?
Gusto
Sulaika.
yung makinig muna sa
Matatapos na
Ano
araw, wala pa rin si
ano sinasabi
Sulaika.
ni
Kanina
Loren?
pa si Loren na nakasalang eh.
Yeah.
Let's listen in for a while and see what's happening over there at the impeachment trial.
At doon po sa Speaker of the House. So, kahit sinama po namin siya to consider everything, again, Your Honor, hindi ho na bago yung utterances na ginawa ng Vice President. Hindi rin ho na bago na yung instruction niya is relentless in killing the tree.
Yes. Attorney Lotok, what I've been trying to ask is not just the utterances which we've watched several times, but all the events leading to the utterances, and that is what I want. I understand what you're saying, that there were attachments or transcription, but the transcription would not be considered an assessment or an investigation. These were perhaps attached as transcription. And you earlier said that the threats are circumstantial. So the and that is the reason why I was looking for that in the affidavit of the investigation. In short, para pong nakulangan ako, pero kung sinabi nyong inattach nyo yung transcript, so be it. But then, if you will read the 50 plus pages again of your investigation, it seemed to me, at least at this point, that snapshots were taken focusing on the October 18 and the utterances, but there seemed to be events leading to it that may have not been included.
With
But
indulgence of Senator
leave
Judge
it at that.
Legarda,
Yes.
kindly wind up, ma'am.
Yes. So the last question, thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Na-interview rin niyo po ang mga miyembro ng media and you asked them factual information. Did you also ask them about the emotional state ng mga kalahok sa media, yung mga pangyayaring naganap bago ginawa yung mga naturang pahayag? In short, not just the factual statement, but the atmosphere, the events leading to that Zoom press conference that led to the perceived or alleged utterances.
Wala po yan sa minutes of meeting, sa Q&A, wala po yan, Your Honor.
Should you not have asked the members of media and the others who were part of that so that you would have, in your own words, sir, the complete picture, so that everything is taken into consideration on why such a highly placed person would give such utterances, because such conditions existed that might have, just might have, elicited it. But you did not do that investigation or at least conversations with the members of media. I leave it at that. Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, Senator Judge Legarda. Senator Judge Pangilinan, you are recognized, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President.
And you may
Just,
proceed when you're ready.
a few questions on inciting to sedition.
Yes, Your Honor.
For the witness, kasi pinapaliwanag mo yung sinasagot mo yung tanong ni Senate President Win kanina, no? Nasa NBI ka na Cybercrime Division since 2018.
Yes, Your Honor. 2018.
So, naalala mo ba yung kaso ni Ronel Mas? Yung taga Zambales na nagkaroon ng Facebook post.
Yes, sir. Naalala ko po, pero hindi ko kami may hawak ng case na yan.
Oh, pero kung maalala mo, dahil division ninyo ang nagsampa ng kasong inciting to sedition, no? Tama ba?
I-check ko yung record. Hindi po yata ako may hawak
Dahil,
ng case.
well, to refresh your memory, nag-post siya sa social media offering 50 million to anyone who would kill former President Duterte. At that time, he
Yes,
was the
sir.
president.
Yes, sir.
So,
That's the news.
you remember that?
Yes, sir. That's the news. Sir.
Oo. Tapos, inaresto siya. Sabi niya, I will give 50 million reward kung sino makapatay sa dating presidente. So, nakita ng inyong division na ito ay inciting to sedition. Tama?
Yes, sir.
And therefore, sinampahan siya ng anti-cybercrime law.
Opo, sir.
Meron ding isang kaso, 14 May 2020. Dito naman sa Osamis. Pero palagay ko police investigation ito, no? Pero same, Cybercrime Prevention Act, inciting to sedition, ginamit ang Facebook account, Joe Mark Medina, and posted that he would give 150 million to anyone who would kill then President Duterte. So ito rin, naging kaso ng anti-cybercrime law.
Nabalitaan din po namin.
Okay. So, dito sa dalawang ito, in other words, to explain inciting to sedition, ang ganitong mga remarks have the tendency precisely to if not attack the government, put it in, mobilize individuals or people to go against government, tama?
Yes, sir.
So that is what you found in the earlier, in the later case of inciting to sedition that you have recommended for PI
Opo, sir.
kay
Yes, sir.
Vice President.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, yung isa sa mga heated arguments namin during that time nung ina-analyze namin yung case, nagtanong kami sa sarili namin, if we allow this unaddressed, yung pagganyan na nagbabanta sa buhay ng presidente, pag hinayaan lang natin at yan yung maging norms na ng ating society, kahit sino na lang po pwedeng gawin yon. At alam ho natin magkakagulo ho pag ganon at walang ang regulation at pag di ho in-strict yan, sasabihin ho ng mga tao, okay naman pala kahit
Lalo na ngayon
mag-threat
dahil sa social media, no? Malaki ang impluensya. Pag nakikitang nangyayari ito at hindi natutugunan,
Opo, sir.
sabi niyo may problema. Thank you. No.
Thank you po, Your Honor.
What is the pleasure of Senator Judge Villanueva?
Yes, Mr. Presiding Officer, just one question, quick question on this particular topic on inciting to sedition, if I may.
The gentleman may proceed.
Yes, again, let me ask the witness, just to clarify the factual basis for the National Bureau of Investigation's possible inciting to sedition. No? We recognize, Mr. Witness, yung strong criticism of the President may fall within the realm of what we call protected political speech. And it's really a balance. And somehow, yun yung nagpapa-confuse paminsan. Kailan nagpo-fall into grave threats, kailan nagpo-fall into inciting to sedition. Pero bilang investigador, ano po yung nakikita ninyo na sa mga pahayag at sa surrounding circumstances na naging basihan po ng NBI para tignan ito bilang posibleng inciting to sedition at hindi lamang ito pumapasok doon sa tinatawag na political criticism?
Yes, Your Honor. Una, kinonsider namin sino yung utterer. So, una, yung utterer, the Vice President, the second highest official of the land. Then, pangalawa, kinonsider namin, ano ba yung mga in-utter ng Vice President? And then, pangatlo, ano ba yung surrounding circumstances na like naging reaksyon nung recipient nung utterances o threats. Nakita ho namin na kung pwede palang gawin ito ng isa sa pinakamataas na posisyon ng Pilipinas at hindi natin ito i-address, hindi natin i-regulate, pwede na rin po pala itong gawin ng kahit na sino. Remember, Your Honor, Vice President is kinukonsider ho natin na model bilang public official. So tinitingnan po natin siya kung ano yung actuation siya sa public, kung ano yung pakikipagrelasyon niya sa ibang public official. So again, Your Honor, nung makita ho namin yan, may effect po sa mga tao. Kung ang Vice President kayang gawin yan at wala namang nangyari, gawin na rin natin yung iba. Yung ini-explain ko nga kahapon, may pattern, may consistent siya, and the fact na bold yung mga statement, pupugutan ng ulo, this country will go to hell because the person na nakaupo is hindi marunong maging presidente. Yung mga factor ho yun, finactor in namin. Pag nakita ito ng taong bayan at walang kilos na ginawa yung gobyerno, parang domino effect po yan, pwede na. So, sunod-sunod na. Alam naman po natin ang nangyayari sa social media. So, nakita namin na dangerous to, alarming siya. So, definitely, nung nag-imbestiga ng NBI at nakalap niya lahat ng kinakailangang ebidensya, yung findings po namin, kasama po doon yung inciting to sedition.
Is it safe to say na yung pinaka-core nito is that when it falls under that category na it somehow steers public uprising?
Definitely, based on our investigation.
Yun
yes,
po yung
Your Honor.
core, would
Yes,
you say?
sir.
And do you use the same methodology as you use doon sa grave test? For example, yung 4 stages na binanggit po ninyo, identification, collection, analysis, legal evaluation, yung elements na binanggit nyo yesterday, yung factors considered, delivery, literal meaning, nature, relationship to the parties, blah, blah, blah. Ito ba?
Yes, sir.
Same?
Opo,
Same?
kasama po yan sa analysis namin. Ano yung epekto nito sa publiko pag ito yung naging norms na natin.
So
at
this is
hindi
the
natin
same na ginamit po ninyo?
Yes, sir.
And last but not the least, Your Honor, Mr. Witness, for purposes of investigating itong inciting to sedition, may we clarify, because it was, I don't know if Senator Bongo made mention about this. To clarify lang, is it necessary that someone was actually incited? Yun po ba, just for purposes of investigating itong inciting to sedition, is it necessary that someone was actually incited para mag-fall dito?
Well, ang basis po namin, yung people versus Nabong, if I'm not mistaken, in order to be seditious yung speeches, it is not necessary na mayroong actual sedition. The law also penalizes or punishes those statements na mag-i-encourage to overthrow the government or to steer the people against the government or to disturb the peace of the community or to undermine public safety and public order.
Thank you
ang
for
naging
the
consideration.
clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr.
Senator Judge Ejercito, thereafter Senator Judge Villar, Mark. What is your pleasure, sir?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Presiding. For just one question.
You may proceed, sir.
Nabanggit mo kanina yung yung admission against interest. Maaari po ba niyong ipaliwanag para mas maintindihan po ng nakarami? At why did you rely on this, if ever, ito pong admission against interest?
Yes, Your Honor. Maalala po natin yung November 2023, yung utterances niya na that she had already contracted a person to kill the President, the First Lady, and the former Speaker, and that she instructed to be relentless. Itong utterance na to, instead na i-deny niya, which is definitely it should be denied kasi that's against her interest, instead na i-deny niya po iyon, nung November 26, na video, nung tinanong siya openly and in public, kung sinabi niya yon, ni-reiterate pa po niya, Your Honor. In fact, inadmit po niya na, oo nga, may kinausap akong tao tungkol dyan. And in fact, sabi niya, may krimen ba? Ano ang nakikitang krimen doon sa may kinausap akong tao na pag namatay ako, patayin mo si BBM, patayin mo si Speaker, patayin mo si Lisa Marcos.
Was this, ito pong sinasabi niyong admission against interest, was this considered in your investigation?
Yes, Your Honor. Kasama po yun. Yun nga yung naging basis namin na aside doon sa utterances niya na no joke, kasi mukhang hindi, yung no joke, sufficient na ba na talagang seryoso siya? Nung makita ko namin yung video, na ni-reiterate pa niya at nag-admit siya, we concluded na seryoso ang Vice Presidente nung in-utter niya yun.
Thank you. No further questions, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Thank you,
Thank you
Senator
po, Your
Judge
Honor.
Ejercito. Senator Judge Mark Villar, you have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Just a brief question for the witness. You mentioned,
Opo, Your Honor.
thank you. You mentioned earlier that there are many factors that come into play when you decide whether or not to file charges regarding grave threats.
Opo.
Now,
Yes,
there
Your
are many
Honor.
factors in how you decide what constitutes a grave threat.
Yes, Your
And I
Honor.
wanted to know, what weight do you give those factors? Are there certain aspects of a grave threat that you put more importance on, whether it's the type of threat or who the threat is made to? What does, in the end, does the NBI give more weight to a certain element of
Yes, Your Honor. It's a convolution of these factors na kinonsider namin. Una, yung delivery or manner in which the utterances were spoken, which is sabi ko nga, nasa atmosphere na kung saan furious and fumingly mad yung Vice President nung sinabi niya yon. And then, aside from delivery and manner, kinonsider namin yung literal meaning ng statement, which is, on its face, makikita natin na even before the press conference was held on November 23, 2024, in fact, even before the questions was thrown by Francis Maui to the Vice President, the Vice President had already contracted.
But is there what do you give the most weight to? I'm aware that you have different factors that come into play.
Kinonsider ho namin-
Is there a specific? Because binanggit nyo po yung, halimbawa, meron kayong 2 tests for grave threat. Binanggit nyo po kahapon. I just wanted to know what is the basis for, or if there is a hierarchy in the level that in all these elements, if there is a hierarchy. What the elements are,
There's a
but is there a
hierarchy.
hierarchy in those whether or not when you decide on whether or not to file charges of grave threats?
Your Honor, it's a combination ng lahat po na factor po
So nothing is given more weight than not one in your past experiences. There's no everything is equal. All these factors that you've mentioned.
Well, in this case, yung literal meaning, at the same time, yung nature ng instruction.
Is it more of the type of the actual threat? If it's a death threat or if it's a, halimbawa, kung sasabihin niya, whether it's a threat is the gravity of the threat a factor, or is it who the threat is made to?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is there something that triggers your investigation more? I mean, what is there a factor that you place more weight to, or that you place more weight to when deciding whether or not to file these charges?
Yung status ho ng nagsasabi nun.
Yeah, when you made the decision, I was curious as to what factors did you put the most weight to?
Yung nature of the instruction as well as yung the fact na may kinausap na siya bago pa man siya tanungin. Yun po yung dalawa na yun, sir.
And these are defined, are these defined in any legal, or this is just purely the discretion of the NBI, or is there a particular definition in the law that would create a hierarchy of...
I would say it satisfies the elements of grave threats, Your Honor.
Okay, but it's not necessarily defined in the law. A lot of it is open to interpretation of the NBI.
Yes, Your Honor. Based on facts, nakita ho namin, papasok ba yung elementong ganito, elementong ganyan, elementong ganon. Nung nagkaroon ho kami ng findings, nirefero namin si DOJ. DOJ, sir, ito ang findings namin. Ano po ang masasabi nyo? Then nag-issue ho ng certification ng DOJ, at ang sabi ng DOJ, certified, all of the elements required for the crime charged is complete. So pwede na tayo mag-proceed sa preliminary investigation.
Yeah, thank you. Importante po kasi na ma-define po natin kung ano po yung grave threat, kung ano po yung... And I just want to know what latitude does the NBI have in deciding whether or not to file a charge of grave threat.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, thank you very much, sir.
Opo, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Senator Judge Mark Villar. Counsel for the respondent.
Just have last few questions, Your Honor.
Apologies. Senator Judge Erwin Tulfo. You may proceed when you're ready, sir. You have no more than 2 minutes.
Thank you. Just one quick question to our witness. Inciting to sedition po yung kinaso ninyo.
Opo, Your
Tama.
Honor.
Pero hindi ba nagbo-border ito yung inciting to sedition to propaganda? Kasi po ayon po sa diksyonaryo, propaganda is a form of communication that aims to shape the people's belief, action, or behavior. Na you say something para udyukan yung tao, para magalit. So, nagbo-border ito between propaganda and inciting to sedition. What made you say that this is inciting to sedition yung pinagsasabi ni Vice President Sara Zimmerman Duterte?
Again, Your Honor, we consider the elements ng inciting to sedition, one of which is yung whether the speeches disturbs the community. And then in-explain ko na po kanina yung mga comments. At the same time, yung responses ng recipients, gaya ng several government agencies and the President himself, as well as the Speaker of the House. And then, Your Honor, whether it would undermine public safety and public order, which is malinaw ho dun sa comments at reaksyon ng ating government agencies like the PNP, like the National Security Council, at ganun din po yung Presidential Communications Office. So, pinapakita ho nila doon na alarming yung situation, it's an active threat, at the same time, it's a matter of national security, at hindi ho ito dapat palampasin. In fact, may classification pa nga yung ibang agency natin na yung kinausap is assassin, both the PNP and the PCO, sir. So, sila ho, nakalampag ho sila, itong mga government agency na to doon sa utterances na ginawa ng Vice Presidente. So, aside from that fact, nakita ho rin namin yung comments from social media platforms na meron ho talagang nabubuong magiging kaguluhan. Although, sabi ko nga po kanina, yung comments sa mga Facebook at social media platforms, hindi lang ho namin nakasama sa...
Okay, still a lot of back and forth between the witness and Senator judges on the nature of the threats and qualifiers on what constitutes threats.
Tayo nga, in a few minutes, na-exhaust na natin.
Did you just compliment yourself?
But you know,
Just a few minutes.
Pero yung director kasi, every time cue na tayo, he says, summarize. Summarize.
Haven't we gone to that already? Let's bring
More
in
of the
somebody
same,
else.
dapat summary nyo. More of the same.
Oh, okay. Next, tama. Good idea, Ami. Next time I'm gonna say it.
Papasa ko sana kay Ami yung pag-summarize.
Okay, at this point, let's bring someone.
Excruciating.
Let's bring someone in who may have a different opinion. We're talking to UP College of Law Associate Dean Attorney Paulo Tamase. Welcome back to Storycon, sir.
Good afternoon to
Hi,
everyone,
attorney.
and to those still viewing the impeachment trial.
Exactly.
Spare thought for us
How do
who
you
have
find
to
it,
watch
sir?
this every day. So
Kasalanan
anyways,
ba ito ng UP o ng Ateneo Law School?
kaya nga eh. So attorney,
Kasalanan po ng lipunan, I think.
kasalanan ng
Mabot tayo
mga
sa
lawyer.
ganito.
Kasalanan to ng mga lawyers, sir, with all due respect. But what do you make of it? What has stood out for you?
I think in the last few days, getting the opportunity to talk about this, the focus of my personal academic criticism has been the over-judicialization of this proceeding. And you see that in full force today. The impeachment court is not a court of law, despite what I think some senators have said. It is not a reviewing tribunal of the NBI and the DOJ in terms of the investigation they have made. It is not a bar examination venue to test whether their recollection of certain cases are correct. The impeachment courts, the Senate really, its own function is solely to try and decide this case and whether to see morally fit yung vice president for the office. And I think to go into technical issues about, are there elements of the offense that have been met? Is there mens rea? All of these things are irrelevant to the question of fitness. And I think it comes from a very crucial misunderstanding of what other high crimes means in the Constitution. The constitutional ground is not actually high crimes. The constitutional ground is other high crimes. And that term of art comes from the Americans, where yung purpose po talaga nung term of art na yun ay to say na mayroong mga pwedeng gawin na masamang bagay, for just to make this very easy to understand. Yung isang public officer na baka hindi nga mag-amount to a crime kasi kulang. And yet it shows na hindi na siya dapat pagkatiwalaan ng office. And I think all sides have lost the narrative as of the last few hours. So hindi pa naman too late. It's still a long trial, but sana we go back to that core issue na you at least on the things na hindi natin pinag-aawayan, that there was an investigation that was conducted, that the video was real, are enough ba to? Or do they build to a case of impeachability or removal from office, or they don't? Yun, I think yun po yung importance sa public and not really the technical know-how and criminal law to review that is going on right now.
Yeah. You missed the first part of our show, attorney. We were saying exactly the same thing. that there's been a lot of legalese and a lot of hair splitting over definitions.
That it's been inconsequentially over-judicialized already.
Pero,
And I think you
attorney,
should be worried na even if yung lawyers mismo ayaw na panoorin yung trial.
Exactly.
Parang,
Marami kong kilalang lawyer eh. They stopped watching. Pero you were saying they have lost the narrative. Sino kaya magre-redirect niya? Gagamitin na natin yung term na ginagamit dyan. Sino magre-redirect ng narrative? Para bumalik tayo doon sa core issue. Yung bang presiding officer, magbo-volunteer ba yung mga senador? O
I think
mag-uusap yung defense at yung prosecution?
I think it has to come from the Senate. Kasi
Senate.
the defense is doing this because ang initial moves ng Senate for them, at least based on the last week, was this is a legal proceeding. We are judges in robes. No, we are going to follow rules of procedure. Ito yung standards of evidence. Very similar to kung paano siya mag-ooperate in court. So, kung ako yung defense, patas yung ginagawa ng defense. This is really how to defend your client in court. If I were the prosecution, patas din, no? Yung pagka mas active ko in objections, in cross-examination, patas din yun if this were a legal proceeding in court. So it has to come from the Senate. Impeachments weren't like this always in the Philippines. If you go back to the era of impeachment, the examination was less technical, mas focused on the testimony of the witnesses and the documents, the material documents they were bringing. The senators weren't even wearing these judicial robes and didn't ask questions like they were in a legal classroom. Yung questions were really clarificatory. They were supposed to clarify kung ano yung value ng evidence, how it related to the impeachable offense, and yung culpability or yung responsibility of the impeachable officer then erupt in it. So, very easy to understand for yung people. And that's why people were glued to their screens during that impeachment trial. But now, if the trial is going to run for 4 to 6 hours every day, alangan namang the economy will stop for this proceeding. And mawala yung public from being from their initial focus and attention to this exercise. So it's not good for the prosecution, certainly, kasi they need to win the public more than anyone. It will not be that good for the defense, even if on the one hand, di ba, parang the attention away from the trial actually helps the VP. But ultimately, hindi niya masasagot yung charges against her, but it is certainly not going to be good for the Senate. Kasi
So how
titigil
can
yung
the
legislative
attorney-
work nila without any without coming closer to what this purpose or the purpose of this proceeding is, which is really accountability dapat.
Pero attorney, how can the Senate do that when the Senate itself is just as polarized as the prosecution and the defense? How can the Senate do that when even most of them don't know how to balance the trial as both a judicial process and as a political process? So, nakita natin how some of the senators are more condescending against each other, against fellow senator judges, than against the prosecution or the defense. How some senators hindi na kinakahiya na sila ay openly partisan. So, hindi ko alam kung saan manggagaling yung impetus or yung initiative to mitigate yung problema na sinasabi nyo, na na-over-judicialize ito. So, ayun lang, hindi ko makita yung Senado doing it.
I mean, kung pwede lang kung mag-team building sila, no, para lang pag-usapan nila yung mga issues nila the last few months, that would be great. I'm sorry to put that. Be very blunt about that.
Nagbabarilan nga eh.
I mean, ideally, no, parang first it comes from the leadership. Hindi lang naman po si Senator Win, yung leader ng majority, you also have a minority leader in the form of APC. If hindi po magagaling sa loob yung pressure to go to a more inquisitorial instead of a more legal type proceeding, then nandyan po yung public. So important po for the public to keep the pressure up. The media is quite important in this as well. Nakita naman natin yung effects nun in the last few months, both in terms of the Senate being pressured to get their act together, elect a Senate President na permanently, which we've seen the last month, and to a certain extent, the development since yesterday. Kasi since yesterday, yung examination, bagaman mahaba pa rin siya, nabawasan. And it's not as technical as it was last week. Yung last week po, authentication lang yun.
Horrible.
And it took 2 days. So, may baby steps na I think yung Senate mismo na nararamdaman nila yung public pressure din na wala nang pakialam yung mga tao dito. So, sayang yung moment din nila to rise up and recover the reputation that they have lost with the public because of the last few months ng leadership squabble. So, baka external talaga ang panggagalingan ng pressure na to.
Hindi nyo ba nakikita, attorney, na pwedeng one side ay strategy yon to take away the attention of the public? Dahil baka ang feeling nila, matatalo sila sa court of public opinion kung patuloy na manonood yung public dito. Hindi ba yan possible na bahagi yan ng strategy ng one side?
Opo, to be very frank, possible po. Na the point is precisely to be frustrated with the trial. And I would say, to a certain extent, fair strategy yun for the defense kung gusto nila talaga na ganoon po yung maging effect. No? Hindi po ibig sabihin that it excuses the Senate of its responsibility and duty over this process. So, yung process po na ito, siya po ultimately, yung Senate po mismo yung nagdidikta. Kaya nga po when you asked earlier, di ba, sino po yung kailangan mag-adjust dito, sino po yung nawala ng narrative. It's actually the Senate that has lost the narrative here. So, hindi pa naman po too late. No? Maaga pa naman po. And I think nakita naman natin yung eagerness ng Senate na huwag masyadong technical yung objections. No? But time is running out in a sense for the public to get glued back to the proceeding. Kung 4 to 6 hours per day po yung proceeding, honestly, mahirap po for anyone whose life is not 100% being glued to this proceeding to keep track.
So to that point, if both sides have lost the narrative, who in effect would be reaping the benefit of the public losing interest in this? I ask that kasi in the end, kasi it is the prosecution that has to prove something. It's the prosecution that has to reach a threshold. The defense just needs to parry and basically just parry and just be passive. It's the prosecution that has to be active in proving its case.
Hindi po. It's the prosecution that has more to lose at this point. Kung ganito po yung pagtakbo ng proceeding, because you're right, the vice president doesn't have to do anything. She will be vice president unless she is convicted in the trial, and the conviction cannot be secured if walang public support for it. We've seen that historically in the Corona impeachment at least. No? In that case, you had a unelected officer being subject of impeachment. Yung public pressure ultimately, especially with the last few days of the trial, probably shifted senators who were expected to vote for Chief Justice Corona. So, if hindi na po nag-pay attention yung public dito sa nangyayari, then it's the prosecution's loss. It's sila po kasi yung may burden. So they can count on explosive testimony. I think everyone honestly is waiting for the chief of staff to testify. Yun po yung inaantay kasi may hilig talaga po sa drama siguro tayo mga Pilipino. But ultimately, hindi po kaya nun i-sustain yung proceeding na ito. No? Kasi not every testimony is going to be explosive. But every testimony certainly, or every witness certainly has to be heard. But if ang narinig po natin mostly is the lawyers talking and not the witnesses, then it's a red flag for the entire proceeding. Baka again, you've over-judicialized it.
How much elbow room does the presiding officer have to keep it a tight trial? Kasi kung ganyan, alam mo naman itong mga senador, independent republic itong mga to, magkakaaway pa sila. Pero the presiding officer has the authority, hindi ba, to control at least the procedures na hindi ganyang...
In the peace.
Kanina pa tayo, paikot-ikot dito, nasa grave threats definition pa rin tayo. How much can he actually do?
Yes, the presiding officer has a big role. I do want to give credit to Senator Cheese since last week. I think the way that the objections were being ruled, the very pro-disclosure rulings that he had, parang letting the witness answer, those are all good things. But in terms of speeding up the process, malaki po yung power ng presiding officer insofar as he is presumed to exercise the power of the whole Senate. So just to give you an illustration in court, in real court, hindi po powerless yung judge to stop a cross-examination or a direct examination for that matter that is already beating a dead horse. So if the point has been proven and corroborative na lang yung further questioning, the judge will often tell, and this is not in the rules of court, but this is how judges speed up the proceeding, they will ask parties to stipulate, no? What if you agree na lang na ganito yung magiging substance of that cross-examination or the rest of the cross-examination? Kung malinaw naman po for the parties, and it is also in their interest not to annoy a judge, kasi alam nila na the judge is the one that's ultimately going to rule, then they will adjust their conduct accordingly. So there's a huge trust, respect that litigants have before a judge, and in this case, the presiding officer. Kasi nanonood din naman, alam ng presiding officer to that extent, especially in this context, na yung public naiinip. If the senator judges are themselves naiinip, they leave the hearing already for extended periods, you can expect that the public is also getting antsy while watching 6 hours of trial in day 5 of 90. So it would be within the power of the presiding officer to actually assert better firmer control over the proceeding na these types of questions, okay na. Or parang these types of questions we understand already. Or you ask the parties to stipulate.
Pwede niyang sabihin yon. Just to illustrate, pwede bang sabihin ni Chis Escudero, natanong na yan kahapon pa eh. Can he say that to a fellow senator?
Pwede po. I think it's easier to say it in a court. No, because in that sense, hindi naman po yung whole public yung nanonood. But now you have millions or hundreds of thousands watching this proceeding. It's a little harder.
Di ba?
No, but
can he say that? Tanong na yan eh. Can he say that?
In theory, pwede po. No? But the thing that stops probably the Senate President from going that aggressively in terms of stopping either the defense counsel or a fellow senator from asking those questions, the Senate that is highly polarized right now. So any firm call, no, or any non-neutral call that is designed to speed up the proceeding might be seen as him going for one or the other side. So we appreciate na mahirap yung situation right now, which again goes back, and I know this is idealistic, kailangan talaga mag-usap yung Senate at this point. But, how do they want the trial to go on? And I understand that in the Corona and the era of impeachments, one of the conflict management devices that the Senate usually had was to go all members caucus sila. Madalas. To set some of these ground rules. And I don't think we're seeing that right now. It's really just one for one or the other side.
I have to say that Senator Chis Escudero has repeatedly said, asked and answered when the defense counsel was cross-examining the NBI witness. There were several times when he did say, asked and answered, move on. So in a way, that's speeding up the process, but still, I think it's dragging on longer than a lot of people are expected. But attorney, help us understand the logic behind. So far, we're starting to see the backbone of a defense for the defense side. First is they're arguing that the vice president's statements were not threats to begin with. Therefore, debating the elements of a threat does not apply in this case because they were not threats to begin with. The second thing that we're seeing is they're contextualizing it. So last week, for instance, the debates were, the defense counsels were saying na, well, she was under systematic oppression. Therefore, she was pushed to this level of anger wherein she uttered those words. The second part here, help us contextualize that because we were saying earlier, wala naman sa law that that mitigates the circumstances of a threat, of a grave threat. What do you think is happening here?
I think they are. If this were a legal proceeding or a criminal proceeding, that's absolutely right. Any passion that comes from being systematically oppressed, ang pinaka-effect na of this were a criminal case is only to lower the penalty. But it doesn't excuse the person from the crime that has been committed. But again, I think the defense, to their credit, understands that they have two avenues of winning this. One is to provide the senator judges with enough legal cover to say that you didn't meet the elements of the offense, and therefore, regardless of your moral feelings against or your views on the morality of what the vice president did, you can always say, no, the elements of the criminal offense weren't met. That's one possible strategy. The other strategy might be, you might rule on the moral aspect. So we'll show you na moral yung ginawa ng vice president insofar as it's righteous anger or it's, really taking an offense at what happened. So definitely not relevant if it were a criminal offense, but the defense seems to understand or have both a legal defense as well as a political defense, if you want to put it that way.
Ang problema, attorney, ay wala namang naipapakita pang proof whatever na meron talagang Romanov threat. No? Ibig sabihin yung threat na Romanov project. So wala pang silang naipapakita, yung defense. Lahat ito ay baka nasa level pa lang ng imagination at this point, no? Dahil wala pa silang pinapakitang konkreto. Mas ang kanilang ine-emphasize ay yung this, even if the threat is authentic, it doesn't entail to be described as a high crime. Kaya isa yon, maliban doon sa contextualization, yung kanilang framework na ito ay not high crime, ay yun yung isang template na ginagamit nila. Ano ba talagang ibig sabihin, attorney, ng high crime? At gaano ito ka-relevant dito sa usapin ng impeachment?
So if we want to look at what that word means, it's a really good question. The American phrase where we take it from is other high crimes and misdemeanors. Ibig sabihin po nun, in the American sense, where we take impeachment from, it really doesn't matter whether yung crime is minor or whether it is major. So if you go back to the discussion earlier, there was a questioning on felony versus crime. Yung distinction na yun that's only relevant in criminal law 1 and not really impeachment. If anything, it shows, or the American definition is, kahit anong act yan. No? In fact, kaya nga ako other high crimes yung ginagamit nung constitution natin is it does not need to correspond to any crime, and cases have explained that to at least on the side, parang as an aside. They say and the Federalist discussion in the US confirms this, na these are offenses that will amount to acts na kulang, alam niyo yun, kung criminal nga po or crime nga po may certain elements, kulang po ng isa or kulang po dalawa, and yet it shows the lack of fitness of the public officer. Kaya nga po yung discussion na petty crime lang yan or parang maliit lang na crime yung threat na yan, hindi naman siya seryoso. I don't think yun po yung tamang framing. If we're just looking at this objectively, no, the framing should be that, alam mo, konti na lang, if anything, grave threat na to. But because of the magnitude of that threat, the context of the person saying it, yung position niya in government, the highly polarized atmosphere we were in, was it showing a lack of judgment na dapat hindi na siya pagkatiwalaan ng public office in the future and dapat tanggalin siya in the current. So hindi po tayo umaabot doon sa ganong kalalim na reflection about what the Vice President did, that video, that press conference, the press conferences after. Kasi po nakafocus po tayo doon sa legal judicial distinctions between felony and crime, and all of these elements na napag-uusapan natin ngayon.
Exactly the question we were asking. I'm going to nominate you to join the senator judges. But anyways, we'll leave that there. Thank you so much for talking to us and explaining all of that. Attorney Paulo Tamase, Associate Dean of the UP College of Law. Salamat, sir.
Salamat, attorney.
Thank you, attorney.
And that is all the time we have for today. The Senate impeachment trial is on recess right now. So we're going to go on recess too. Join us again tomorrow, 4 p.m. for Storycon. I'm Regina Lee.
I'm Ed Lingao, kapatid. We are One News, your side all the time.